Now we'll have to move to item 9. But before doing so, it's my pleasure now to recognize in our midst the Honorable Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports from Jamaica, Honorable Olivia Gange, which is with us. Welcome, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let us now move on to item 9, issues concerning the follow-up of inscribed elements on the list of the Convention. I believe this is the first time that the committee is presented with an item dedicated to the follow-up and monitoring of elements inscribed on the list of the Convention. I would now please ask the Secretary to present the item to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Indeed, this is a new subject matter that the Secretariat has brought to the attention of the committee. And for this reason, I would like to ask for the indulgence of the committee in advance if my presentation is a little lengthy compared to some of the other items. Let me first start by making it clear that this item does not aim to make a decision today on the establishment of a follow-up mechanism. Rather, the Secretariat wishes to launch a discussion on this subject based on the experience accumulated so far, and before going any further on the relevance of a follow-up mechanism for inscribed elements, allow me to first briefly recall that the status of inscribed elements is currently monitored through two existing mechanisms: periodic reporting and the guidelines on the treatment of correspondence. Periodic reporting is currently the main mechanism allowing for the regular monitoring of elements following their inscription, as presented in subchapter 4 of the operational directives. Reporting on the status of elements inscribed on the representative list is undertaken every 6 years as part of each state party's periodic report on the implementation of the Convention at the national level. As for elements inscribed on the urgent safeguarding list, reporting on their status is operated every 4 years following the inscription of the element. In both cases, this reporting mechanism encourages community involvement, yet remains state-driven. Importantly, periodic reporting does not allow the possibility for communities and other concerned stakeholders to signal emerging situations in between two reporting cycles. In addition to the periodic reporting mechanism, the committee established in 2012 some guidelines for the treatment of correspondence from the public or other concerned parties with regards to nominations. In this regard, allow me to underline the distinction made in the guidelines between the correspondence relating to elements that are nominated for inscription on the list of the Convention and that relating to elements that are already inscribed. As you might see on the screens, correspondence related to elements nominated for inscription is transmitted to the Secretariat by the Secretariat to the state concerned in the language it was received. The response of the state concerned, if any, is then communicated back to the entity that sent the correspondence through the Secretariat. Correspondence, including the letter received and the response from the submitting state, is made available to the committee and the evaluation body prior to their respective meeting. Through this mechanism, the committee has oversight through the evaluation body that it establishes every year on the assessment of the correspondence received on nominations. Concerning correspondence related to elements that are already inscribed, the mechanism functions in a different manner. When received, correspondence is transmitted by the Secretariat to the state concerned in the language it was received. Then the response of the state, if any, is forwarded to the entity that sent the correspondence. However, the guidelines do not foresee for this correspondence to be brought to the attention of the committee. In other words, when it comes to correspondence linked to inscribed elements, and unlike what is foreseen for correspondence concerning nominations, communication is only operated between the state party and the stakeholder that initially sent the correspondence through the Secretariat. No means is foreseen for the committee to be informed of such correspondence, even though it may pertain to important issues affecting the status of inscribed elements. Since the inception of the lists, the Secretariat regularly receives letters concerning nominated elements, inscribed elements, or elements of intangible cultural heritage in general. However, in the past 2 years, the number of letters received has significantly increased, with around 100 messages in the form of emails, letters received regarding the latest developments affecting the status and viability of an inscribed element. These letters concern 12 different elements inscribed on the representative list and the urgent safeguarding list and practiced in 10 different countries. What we can observe from these 12 cases is that information pertaining to the changing status of inscribed elements can be brought to the attention of the Secretariat by a wide range of stakeholders. More than a third of the correspondence originates from the community itself that considers the element as part of its living heritage. In addition, states, media, NGOs, universities, or individuals who are outside of the community are also susceptible to alert the Secretariat on emerging situations. Furthermore, allow me to also mention that some of the letters received are anonymous, in which case they are simply registered by the Secretariat without being transmitted. Another characteristic of the correspondence recently received is the seriousness of some of the cases raised, and I do not intend to go into the specifics of any individual case, but I believe it is important to mention some examples of the types of issues described in those letters. For example, several cases relate to the introduction of policy or legislative measures leading to restriction of practice of an element by community members. At times, these initiatives appear to be in direct contradiction with the safeguarding measures described in the nomination file of the element. Lack of community involvement in the implementation of safeguarding measures is also a reason raised in several cases brought to our attention. Facts described in these letters would contradict Article 15 of the Convention as well as criteria 3 and 4 of both lists. In one case, representatives from the communities in question expressed a deep concern over the decreasing viability of their intangible cultural heritage and considered the possibility of requesting the transfer of the element from the representative list to the urgent safeguarding list. Beyond those examples, let me also mention that some messages received raise rather unusual, if not sometimes even absurd, issues. The diversity of cases would also therefore need to be taken into consideration when deciding on an appropriate way to treat such correspondence. So how have we been treating in the application of the guidelines for the treatment of correspondence from the public or other concerned parties with regard to nominations, which was adopted by the committee in 2012? The Secretariat forwarded the letters received to the competent authorities of the nomination concerned in 8 cases. In 5 of these cases, states parties provided a response that was then transmitted back to the entity that had sent the initial correspondence. In 2 instances, the exchange of correspondence led to improved collaboration between governmental authorities and communities for a joint development and implementation of safeguarding measures. However, in one case, the state party concerned seemed to confirm that recent measures did indeed restrict the enactment of the practice in contradiction to the safeguarding measures elaborated in its file. In a few cases, transmission of correspondence has led to concrete measures that could ultimately improve the viability of the element. However, in most cases, the current system for the follow-up of inscribed elements has demonstrated a limited impact. In fact, once correspondence has been received, the sole option for the Secretariat is to transmit it to the state party concerned without the possibility of commenting or informing the committee, and this despite the seriousness of the issues raised in some of these situations. These cases point to the absence of an effective mechanism allowing the committee to fulfill its mandate. Without any ways for the Secretariat to inform the committee of emerging situations, the committee remains blind to the evolving status of elements after their inscription. The risk is such that lapse will affect the credibility of the systems of the Convention, and this is the reason why the Secretariat decided to propose the inclusion of this item on the agenda. Broader considerations that might be considered include the reflection around the need for a follow-up of inscribed elements being linked to a number of broader issues that the committee may wish to take into consideration in its debates. Concerning periodic reporting, in 2017, the committee decided to reform the periodic reporting mechanism. This currently only affects the submission of reports on the status of elements inscribed on the representative list and not those on the urgent safeguarding list. Any development in the establishment of a follow-up mechanism would need to take into consideration as well the ongoing reform of the periodic report mechanism. The issue of transfer of elements between lists. A follow-up mechanism for inscribed elements could also be relevant in the context of the removal and transfer of elements. It could indeed make it possible for communities and third parties to provide information that is relevant to the assessment of the effectiveness of the safeguarding plan. This would in turn allow the evaluation body and the committee to benefit from a wide range of information and to take a fully informed decision. The reflection on the future of the listing system. Beyond the inscription process, a reflection on the nature of the listing system could include a discussion on the possible need for a follow-up mechanism for inscribed elements. Such a mechanism appears to be important to guarantee the credibility of the list and to allow the committee to properly fulfill its mandate. With these broader considerations in mind, the committee may wish to discuss the ways in which it could be informed of changing factors affecting the status of an inscribed element. The working document presented to the committee lists a number of aspects that might be considered important to determine how the committee envisages the possible establishment of a full-fledged follow-up mechanism. These are some of the key questions that we ought to ask and discuss in the reflection on the possible introduction of such a follow-up mechanism. For instance, what would be the objectives of the mechanism? Who would initiate the follow-up mechanism for a specific element and on what basis? Should correspondence be screened prior to its potential transmission to the committee? Who should be involved in the follow-up of these inscribed elements? What type of monitoring actions could the committee potentially request? What are the budgetary implications of establishing a follow-up mechanism? As I said, the establishment of the follow-up mechanism could be seen as linked to a number of the broader issues and ongoing reflections that that the committee has been discussing on the convention, such as the procedures of the removal of an element from one list and the transfer of an element from one list to the other, on the nature and purposes of the lists and the register established under the convention, and on the relevance of the various criteria for each of these inscriptions, of these mechanisms, The draft decision 13-9 therefore proposes to integrate the reflection on the establishment of a full-fledged follow-up mechanism into this broader reflection and into the mandate of the open-ended intergovernmental working group that the committee decided to convene in 2017 and that the government of Japan generously proposed to support. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I now open the floor. Does anybody wish to intervene on this item? Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Azerbaijan. Yes, Philippines, you can start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an interesting item with bearings on the future directions of the Convention. On the one hand, it is important to monitor elements as they are living cultural expressions which change over time. It also gives greater meaning and significance to inscription on the lists, including the transfer of elements between the lists. It also mirrors the system under the World Heritage Convention in which inscribed sites are regularly monitored, and the committee takes action to send reactive monitoring missions, decides to include sites on the World Heritage List in danger, or even removes sites from the World Heritage List. On the other hand, there are risks of further politicization, since it would involve screening communications that could be received from a wide range of stakeholders. A different set of procedures is required to assess communications and responses of states parties. It could also require consultation and dialogue with states parties concerned. We note that not a very large number of elements have received communications. Nevertheless, it is a matter to study. We believe that the committee should be informed and have a say in the process, being the intergovernmental mechanism tasked to monitor the implementation of the Convention in accordance with Article 7. Going back to the screening of communications, perhaps the Bureau or any other body which can be will be a subject of discussion during the experts meeting to be funded by Japan could be tasked to examine communications pertaining to elements. Only in the most serious instances should the matter be elevated to the committee. Follow-up is also related to Operational Directives 39 and 40, which provided the committee can remove an element from the lists when it determines that it no longer satisfies one or more criteria for inscription on the lists. Whether accredited NGOs could play a role in this process is another issue to consider. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
May I now invite Azerbaijan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Azerbaijan also would like to thank the Secretariat for bringing up this issue of the follow-up of inscribed elements on the lists of the Convention before we start discussing the nominations submitted for the inscription this year and for the very detailed document prepared in this regard. We believe it is indeed a very important issue, as it is already also mentioned by our distinguished delegation of Philippines. And this issue sometimes linked to the complexity of issues around ICH elements, including sensitivities between different stakeholders in the process of safeguarding after an inscription has happened. Our delegation would be in favor of careful approach on this issue. From the first look, we welcome the practice established so far with the monitoring of the elements using the reformed periodic reporting mechanism. But we would like, we would be in favor to continue the treatment of such correspondence on the basis of the guidelines for the treatment of correspondence from the public or other concerned parties with regard to nominations. We believe the committee needs to be cautious in considering the correspondence that has never been a part of the nomination file concerned as originally submitted. The original files outline and delimit the scope of elements and practitioners, as well as elements' social and cultural functions, while the committee has no evidence to confirm or to deny if the correspondence fully or partially, directly or indirectly relates to the elements inscribed. There is no monitoring mechanism within the committee to verify whether the information provided in this correspondence is true or not. Many ICH elements have sensitive issues linked to the relationship within and among the concerned communities, and the committee should be cautious in taking whatever position without a clear picture of the situation. Finally, we also know that any development in possible follow-up mechanism would imply an additional workload to the committee, secretariat, and possibly for the evaluation body, as well as certainly financial implications. In that sense, we would like to commend the government of Japan, who generously supported this task and reflection on this issue. We would also support gaining more experience and reflection with this reform of the periodic reporting mechanism, and possibly revisiting this issue after a full 6 years reporting cycle. Thank you.
Thank you, Azerbaijan. I have on my list Cuba, Netherlands, Colombia, and Austria. I now give the floor to Cuba.
Gracias, señor presidente. Deseamos agradecer a la Secretaría por la información presentada y por traer también este tema a nuestro comité. Nos parece que es un tema de especial importancia. Todo el proceso de seguimiento al estado de conservación y salvaguardia de los elementos inscritos en la lista de patrimonio inmaterial, pero también debemos iniciar un proceso de reflexión que nos permita mantener a salvo la credibilidad también de este comité y de la convención en sí misma. Esto es un mecanismo que podría ser muy parecido al mecanismo de monitoreo reactivo que tiene la Convención de 1972 y que hoy también acarrea problemas en este sentido por toda la politización que se da en el marco de este mecanismo. Creo entender, por lo que leo en el documento, que no es un sistema que replicaría o trataría de replicar lo que pasa en la Convención del 72, pero en todo caso llevaría un mecanismo, una reflexión profunda por los miembros del comité y también por otros miembros, los miembros de la Convención, para poder encontrar la fórmula de dar un seguimiento a estos elementos sin que politicemos nuestro comité, sin que genere un mayor problema. Todos conocemos lo que pasa en el marco de la Convención de 72 cuando tenemos que examinar los casos que están sujetos a un mecanismo de monitoreo reactivo. Quizás habría que reflexionar sobre cómo podemos profundizar dentro del informe del Estado parte preguntas específicas en aquellos estados que tengan estos tipos de problemas, porque además quizás en la Convención del 72 es muy fácil localizar el problema porque se trata de patrimonio inmueble y está en un lugar, hay medidas de salvaguardia muy específicas, pero en el patrimonio inmaterial es mucho más complejo. Una manifestación, un elemento puede tener representaciones a lo largo de todo un país y no necesariamente podemos decir que el elemento en sí mismo está en crisis porque en un lugar específico o en una comunidad puedan haber determinados problemas. Sobre todo creemos que este tiene que ser un proceso en el que el diálogo con los Estados miembros sea fundamental para poder encontrar la mejor manera de implementar nuestra convención y sobre todo, lo más importante, de salvaguardar el patrimonio inmaterial. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Cuba. Netherlands.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat states clearly that information from different stakeholders on the changing situation of elements or concerns from communities about inscribed elements of ICH is at stake here. To bring these concerns on the changing status of an element to the committee, a follow-up mechanism is needed. In our view, this could be, as a starting point, as a first phase, a mechanism of mediation that is focused on mapping certain problems and finding ways to solve these problems. State parties and experts could play a role in this. This is a way to apply the ethical principles as is being referred to in item 3 of the draft decision, and in item 5, I quote, to provide ways for communities and civil society to participate more directly in the monitoring of inscribed elements, unquote. We are aware of the fact that this will be part of the broader discussion in the working group supported by Japan. Thank you.
Thank you, Netherlands. I now invite Colombia to share with us.
Gracias, presidente. Colombia apoya la propuesta de la Secretaría de iniciar una discusión y una reflexión sobre los mecanismos de seguimiento a las manifestaciones que están inscritas en las listas. Consideramos que esto no solamente puede ser una propuesta para aprovechar e incluir más a las comunidades en los seguimientos a la forma en que las manifestaciones son administradas en cada país, pero también puede dar herramientas a los países para su propia administración a nivel nacional. Consideramos que los elementos que correspondan a la Convención de 2003 o que podamos retomar de otras convenciones los discutiremos en ese momento y pues ofrecemos todo nuestro apoyo técnico para esta reflexión. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Colombia. Can I ask Austria?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In line with other delegations, Austria understands that the increasing number of letters of concerns regarding the status of inscribed elements demands creative solution and additional resources. And we strongly agree that communities, bearers, the civil society and NGOs should be involved in the monitoring of inscribed elements. We believe that bottom-up approaches and dialogue are the best way to move forward, and in this regard there is a need for a platform for exchange, dialogue and reflection, as the delegation of the Netherlands has emphasized before. Dear colleagues, please allow me to briefly mention also an exemplary meeting which was organized by the National Commissions of Germany, Luxembourg, Switzerland and Austria this year. Based on our individual experiences gained from the implementation of the Convention on the national level, Community representatives, bearers, ICH experts, official bodies, and media representatives from 4 European countries shared and discussed challenges, but also positive developments and outcomes that they have encountered before or after the inscription of elements. Issues discussed concern topics such as gender, minority rights, commercialization, and animal rights. And dealing with these issues is indeed very complex and highly sensitive, but our experience has shown that a transparent and inclusive dialogue and reflection with all stakeholders involved can foster mutual respect and understanding. As the Secretariat has just presented, there are many serious questions to be reflected on concerning the follow-up of inscribed elements, which go beyond the scope of our discussions here. Thus, I would like to express our gratitude again to the government of Japan, whose generous contribution allows for a proper discussion of these sensitive and important issues on an expert level. And also, we are ready to share our experience in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia. After Austria, I invite Belgium and Algeria. Belgium first.
Thank you very much. As it is the first time the Belgian delegation takes the floor, we wish to thank and congratulate Mauritius for the hospitality and excellent organization of this meeting. This item on the agenda is very interesting and important, and we do think it is high time to start discussing the follow-up of the effects of inscription of elements on the list of the convention and the safeguarding practices involved. We would like to make some comments. The first comment concerns the involvement of communities, groups, and individuals, as emphasized, among others, in Article 15 of the Convention. We did notice the fact that in this and other documents, often only communities are mentioned, sometimes even in singular instead of the plural. It has been remarked in several previous meetings of the Intergovernmental Committee that it would best be to avoid this reductionist interpretation and to stick as closely to the basic text as possible, so to systematically mention communities, groups, and where appropriate, individuals. The second comment is about a number of steps or stages that seem to be missing before and between the reception of a letter and comment on the one hand and the possible examination by the Secretariat, the evaluation body, the Bureau, or even the Intergovernmental Committee. There is, as the delegation from the Netherlands just mentioned, a whole zone of prevention, mediation, and mitigation that can be developed in between. There are several possibilities, and the first option is to start working on the interactive online platform with ethical tools. This was already decided and requested by the Intergovernmental Committee in 2015 in the Windhoek meeting in decision 10-COM-15A. It would allow to develop and share a set of forms, documents, or procedures, like for instance the forms of prior and also sustained informed consent, as mentioned in Ethical Principle 4. This would allow to avoid a number of problems or to facilitate mediation. It would also be a way to involve NGOs and other stakeholders in finding solutions. Connected to this it would be important to find the structure of mediation. This could take the form of an ethical committee or a number of mediation committees to try and solve problems in a lighter way of solving problems. This would also allow to involve specialized mediators, NGOs, and other actors without adding work to the workload of the evaluation body. So please do consider the development of lighter mediation structures using the resources and wisdom available among the many actors working in safeguarding intangible cultural heritage. And in first place, please follow up on decision 10-COM-15A, 9, and 10. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Belgium. Avant de passer la parole à Algérie, j'ai deux membres du comité qui voudraient intervenir, Arménie et Sénégal. J'invite maintenant l'Arménie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a small remarks. I would like to join distinguished representative of Austria for her comments, and I would like to add that culture, especially intangible cultural heritage, is a tool to bring about peaceful global transformations and to preserve and to pass to our future generations the unique customs, traditions, and national cultural expressions that would have otherwise disappeared. And the role of the barriers, the communities, is very crucial and important in this sense. And regarding the decision of nomination files, I would like to see improvement in screening of the nomination files, because we need more scrupulous screening of the nominations files, not to receive more negative opinions regarding it, especially whenever there are communications from public, NGOs, or from one or more states. This should serve as an alarm for the evaluating body and for the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Armenia. Maintenant, je donne la parole au Sénégal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La délégation du Sénégal remercie vivement le secrétariat pour cette question importante dans la mise en œuvre de la Convention. Le mécanisme de suivi est en effet un outil d'évaluation des éléments déjà inscrits sur la liste représentative qui nous paraît essentiel. Il faudrait donc que véritablement nous puissions confier ce dossier à déjà un organe de groupe de travail pour approfondir la question. Il nous semble également important de rappeler que les communautés dépositaires du PCI ont un système interne de régulation et de gestion de l'élément et que tout mécanisme doit en tenir compte. Il est également important que le secrétariat filtre, en tout cas, ait une attention particulière sur les correspondances reçues par un filtrage adéquat. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Sénégal. Maintenant, je donne la parole à l'Algérie.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de nous donner la parole en tant qu'observateur. Nous souhaitions juste faire quelques remarques à ce sujet, comme nous avions pris la parole au début de la session de ce comité sur ce même sujet, l'évaluation et le suivi des éléments qui ont été inscrits. Pour nous, au-delà du fait qu'il faudra, lors de la réunion du groupe de travail, donc open-ended, des experts qui vont plancher sur cela, nous souhaitions savoir s'il y avait la possibilité que le secrétariat, bien sûr sans rajouter à l'extrême burden de travail qu'ils ont, si on pouvait avoir un survey, un questionnaire en ligne à ce sujet. Surtout basé sur le dernier slide qui nous a été présenté des différentes questions pour pouvoir, avec les États membres, de faire un sondage d'opinion avant d'aller à cette réunion. Donc nous souhaitions savoir si cela était possible. Et aussi, nous avions une autre question. Une fois qu'on adopte des propositions sur le suivi des éléments inscrits dans la liste, est-ce qu'il y aura besoin de changer les textes régaliens de notre comité ou de la Convention? C'est-à-dire quelles seront les implications légales qui vont suivre après, parce qu'il faudra les prendre en considération au moment où nous prendrons la décision d'adopter cela. Cela étant dit, nous souhaitons juste faire aussi un commentaire concernant la manière dont ce suivi sera fait. Nous avons des propositions bien sûr, mais pour nous les communautés doivent être impliquées, et pour éviter toute forme de politisation, il faudrait peut-être limiter ça aux personnes qui sont touchées par une inscription, c'est-à-dire qui ont ou participé à l'inscription ou qui sont impliqués, donc de la communauté qui a été impliquée par l'inscription. Et enfin, concernant le suivi en lui-même, je pense qu'en tant que les membres du comité devraient pouvoir avoir la possibilité d'enclencher une enquête sur le terrain pour savoir quel est le degré de dommage qui a été fait ou qui est en train de se faire à un élément qui est inscrit. Et ces enquêtes-là pourraient être faites par, qu'on pourrait mandater peut-être les instituts de catégorie 2 ou les facilitateurs ou une autre partie, mais nous pensons sincèrement qu'une enquête sur le terrain pourrait être une bonne solution à cela. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Merci beaucoup, l'Algérie. Et avant de prendre le vote, je voudrais demander au secrétariat de nous éclairer sur les quelques points soulevés par l'Algérie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, and I'd like to thank all the delegates who intervened, indeed, raising multiple issues which show the complexity of the issue at hand. And I reiterate that the purpose here is to initiate a discussion which I think will require several steps and multiple consultations, as has been mentioned. I heard a few mentions of the question of screening because of the diversity of kinds of issues. Ideas like informal mediation, the need to be cautious, the need to have people or communities, groups, and in some cases individuals fully involved when they are those who are related to the nomination. I also heard the comments from the Honourable Delegate of Cuba, which indeed seem highly pertinent. We should probably not, in fact, approach monitoring of ICH in the same way one approaches monitorings of sites and monuments, because the implications are very different. I would say we are looking to get ideas, and again, we thank the government of Japan for making it possible to reflect on this. Electronic surveys could be one means, incorporating also into other discussions would be another one. But what we take from this, it is indeed worth to continue this reflection and this discussion, but although we are not going to, at this very, very early stage, come out with any specific suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'll now move to adopt draft decision 13-9. Does it appear on the screen? And we proceed paragraph by paragraph. Paragraph 1, the citation of the document. Any objection? Adopted. Paragraph 2, reference to the Philippines, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. We have a small amendment to this paragraph at the beginning, recalling Article 7 of the Convention, comma. Article 7 of the Convention talks about the functions of the Intergovernmental Committee, and we believe it should be the locus of any monitoring if we so decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippine. I wish to have the views of members. Any objection to this inclusion about Article 7, which I believe is very pertinent and precise to the point? If there is no objection, amendment proposed is adopted. Therefore, we adopt paragraph 2 as amended. Paragraph 3. Any objection? Adopted. Paragraph 4. Adopted. Paragraph 5 for the follow-up mechanism. Philippines, yes?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. On this paragraph, we note that it may be construed to preempt or prejudge the discussions we are still to have, since it says the need already to strengthen and to provide ways. But I think from our just recently concluded discussion, it's clear that there are many suggestions, but no real answers yet, and we still have to go through this process. So we would suggest to slightly amend the language in 5, and instead of to replace to strengthen with to reflect on. And then also to delete to provide. And also to delete more directly. So this, I think, would reflect the reflection. So thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you. I believe Azerbaijan has something to say on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Azerbaijan would like to support the proposal made by Philippines. It's entirely reflects the spirit of our discussions. Thank you.
Let us hear Cuba. What are the views of Cuba?
Gracias, señor presidente. También apoyamos la propuesta de Filipinas y en relación a la propuesta de Países Bajos y de Austria, nos parecía que empezar a abrir la lista ahora de posibles implicados puede ser más complicado, porque también tendríamos a los centros de investigación, podríamos tener a las universidades, podríamos tener otros expertos que no sean necesariamente vinculados a los estados y comenzaríamos ya el debate. Quizás los proponentes pueden compartir nuestro punto de vista, sería mejor dejarlo en comunidades o dejarlo simplemente para el seguimiento de los elementos inscritos, y este deberá ser un elemento que guíe el debate, porque la lista podría ser interminable, porque nosotros también tendríamos interés en proponer otros actores que podrían ser fundamental en esta participación. Muchas gracias.
Let us hear Sénégal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Sénégal voudrait soutenir fortement ce paragraphe en encourageant un mécanisme inclusif et participatif de suivi des communautés. C'est extrêmement important. Donc nous souhaiterions vraiment que cet élément-là soit bien en vue à ce niveau-là. Merci.
Merci. Palestine.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Vous remarquez que pendant le débat, je n'ai pas pris la parole parce que tout le monde est d'accord qu'une réflexion doit être menée. Et on est effectivement d'accord. Moi, j'avais une remarque effectivement sur la proposition de Netherlands and Austria qui va dans le même sens de Cuba. Tout d'abord, je soutiens aussi la proposition de Philippines. Vous pouvez ajouter la Palestine là-dessus. Par contre, effectivement, je suis d'accord avec notre collègue de Cuba. Si on doit citer tous les partis concernés, on n'en finira pas. Et puis, pourquoi limiter les choses? Donc, ou bien on garde ways for communities and concerned stakeholders or other concerned parties, ou bien on le biffe complètement. Simplement, on met communities, simplement. Aller commencer à dire les groupes, les individus et je ne sais quoi, on s'en sortira pas. Communities, c'est compris aussi généralement parmi les membres et les experts. Des fois, les communities pourraient être des groupes, pourraient être des individus, etc. Donc, soit on laisse communities, ou si on veut, on met and concerned parties. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
La Colombie.
Gracias, señor presidente. Colombia soporta la propuesta de Filipinas y quisiéramos también sumarnos a la propuesta de Cuba, que hablemos de las comunidades y los demás stakeholders y lo dejemos así, porque en cada caso y en cada país el tema de las personas, las comunidades o los entes involucrados con las manifestaciones dependen de cada caso. y hablar de comunidades y stakeholders cubre todos los posibles participantes. Muchas gracias.
Poland.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to support the amendment proposed by Netherlands and Austria. By this, we stick to the language of the Convention, having this amendment inside. Thank you.
Armeni?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As previously said, we give our full support to Austria, and in this case, Austria and Netherlands inclusion, and also Palestine included other concerned parties, or no, I'm sorry, Palestine said other concerned stakeholders or other concerned parties to have as wide coverage as possible, because when we are talking about ICH elements, it's really people, the actual barriers who are concerned. Thank you.
Jamaica.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jamaica also adds its support to the amendments proposed by Cuba, Palestine, and the other state parties reflected in number 5. Thank you.
In fact, we have got 2 amendments proposed. One is to reflect instead of reinforcing, and I believe that everybody is agreeable on that. And the second one is whether we should limit ourselves to communities or whether we should extend it outside communities. This is where, yes, Austria.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, the only reason we brought it in was to stick to the language of the convention, as already it was mentioned also by the delegation of Belgium. So we did not want to add up, but just to stick to the standard language. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for this. Thank you for this clarification. I see Djibouti.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Ce document est très important dans le suivi, comme déjà les interventions précédentes ont bien souligné. Je voudrais intervenir au point 5 pour qu'on puisse ajouter, outre les communautés de la société civile, les praticiens ainsi que les détenteurs. Merci.
Now I take it that Djibouti is proposing that instead of communities, we try to be more precise by stating practitioners and bearers. At least here, we are not extending it too much, and we know specifically whom we are targeting on that score. Let me first, I give the floor to the Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I think we've come again to the question of what are communities, which is something that is, whilst never having been specifically defined in the Convention, is something that has constantly been used to as referred. And it is generally understood, for example, that communities includes practitioners and bearers. Communities are practitioners and bearers. And throughout the nomination files, practitioners and bearers are the communities that are identified. And it is true that in the operational directives, the language of communities, groups, and in cases individuals is the language that has been used up until now. And it is a way of understanding who these practitioners and bearers are, or various others. So the standard practice in the Convention has been to use communities, groups, and individuals, at least in the operational directives. And that has been in practice for a number of years, particularly since TENCOM. But so, if with the kind understanding of Djibouti, I think we can definitely consider that practitioners and bearers is what communities means. That is the practice of the Convention. As to whether we keep using, as in line with the decision at the TENCOM, communities, groups, and individuals, it is indeed the language that has been used since then, but that is for the committee to decide how it wishes to use it in this case. Thank you.
Palestine wanted to intervene and to come to...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I wanted just to mention the same thing that Mr. Curtis has mentioned about practitioners and bearers. And second thing, actually, communities, groups, and individuals also, as mentioned, it is the language of the operational guideline. So it's up to us to use what language we would like here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Cuba.
Gracias, señor presidente. También vemos con un poco de preocupación que no estaríamos limitando un poco este párrafo, porque la necesidad de la reflexión no es solo para abrir una manera, un camino para que las comunidades, individuos puedan trabajar y contribuir. O sea, también esta reflexión nos lleva a mejorar las medidas de salvaguardia, a mejorar la gestión. O sea, no podemos limitar que esta reflexión solamente va a ir encaminada a mejorar y a ofrecer a las comunidades e individuos un camino mucho más expedito para participar. O sea, la participación es un poco más amplia y también el sentido de la reflexión tiene que también ser mucho más amplio, pero en todo caso facilitaremos su lectura de la sala y nos iremos junto al consenso.
Libanon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous soutenons la proposition des Philippines pour ce qui est de réfléchir au suivi des éléments, mais aussi nous sommes pour utiliser le vocabulaire de la Convention, c'est-à-dire les communautés, les groupes et, le cas échéant, les individus.
Le Liban, China.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My delegation would like to echo the proposal by Palestine and Colombia to add other concerned stakeholders after communities, and at the same time, we would like to suggest to delete the civil society, because we would like to, when we mention the other concerned stakeholders, we just will include may include the civil society as well. And having said that, we just keep this decision wording as simple and precise. Thank you.
Thank you, China. Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we listened very closely to all the suggestions, and we have now a kind of compromise proposal similar to the last two speakers, Lebanon, that said that we should track the language of the convention, also the operational directives, and also China, which mentioned that civil society isn't, let's say, mentioned in the operational directives and the relevant Article 1 of the convention, for instance. So our proposal is, to cut it short, let's use the language in Operational Directive 16. At the end of that operational directive, the phrase is concerned communities, groups, and if applicable, individuals. And this might bring everybody to some consensus. This would be a proposal. Again, it would be to use Operational Directive 16, and the phrasing is concerned communities, comma, groups, and if applicable, individuals, then to participate in the mod.
Poland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that after having heard what has been spoken by Secretariat, I would be very much in favor to not only to make more simply our language, but more directly stick to the language of convention. And so now I see that we are going to create somehow new definitions, like adding, for example, practitioners and bearers. So it's included, in fact, in communities, like has been said. So I'd be very much in favor to be with the language formed before. It means communities, groups, and applicable individuals. So extending of this language would be somehow be understood or misunderstood, I should say. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pass over the Secretary.
I just want to, in fact, realize that I mentioned earlier that it was in the operational directives, if not in the convention. It is actually in the text of the convention itself under Article 15, which is, as I read it, communities, groups, and where appropriate, individuals that create, maintain, and transmit such heritage. There have been many debates, and we could perhaps save time by going straight to the language of the convention. These have been debated before, with the kind permission of the room. The question, if I may, I think as the amendment of the Philippines, the question is whether to retain other concerned stakeholders. And I think if that question is resolved, this paragraph is close to.
Sénégal, yes.
Monsieur le Président, donc j'avais souhaité intervenir depuis un moment. C'était juste pour appuyer fortement la déclaration de M. Curtis, secrétaire de la Convention, qui a utilisé effectivement le langage de la Convention parce que communauté est beaucoup plus englobante et donc appropriée à ce niveau-là. C'est ce que je voulais juste ajouter. Merci.
Have we included what appears to be a consensus among members that we should adhere to the language of the convention? Do we have it now? C'est okay. Yes, Philippine?
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Chair, we can go along with the suggestion to track convention or operational directives language. When we suggested to use the language in Operational Directive 16, it was to precisely deal with a concerned, because that operational directive uses concerned communities. And I think this could be a useful way to address all the concerns. So ways for concerned communities, groups, and where applicable, or if applicable, individuals. And to delete the rest. Delete other concerned stakeholders, delete civil society there. But on the understanding that we're tracking what is in the convention and the operational directives. Thank you.
We have, I believe, quite lengthily debated on that. May I suggest that we follow the guidance of Philippines on that score when we move on that score?
Just to have a look, if I may.
Let us first incorporate what Filipino stated, and then we see if Palestine want. Okay. Yes, Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's in the same sense. I'm taking the floor to ask the Secretariat kindly if they can clean up the paragraph in order to read it clearly, and then we will decide. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Palestine, you want to? Yes.
Yes, Mr. Chair, just a technical issue. Could it be possible to erase all the red things that had been added and keep only the last proposal of Philippine in order to be able to read the paragraph and, if needed, to amend it, if not, to adopt it? Just to delete everything in red and add the word concerned, proposed by Philippine, delete the civil society, and delete everything in red. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, yes, Secretary.
Yeah, I think we have to be a little bit careful because we have the earlier things were about strengthening and so on. So just please, just bear with us for a minute. If you want, why don't we at first delete the names or hide the names of the countries, which confuses things. So we will hide the names of the countries. Yeah, okay. Because it's the number of names of countries that is now confusing things, I think. So if you allow us, there will be another paragraph temporarily pasted below without the names of the countries, which will allow for a clearer reading of the sentence. Yeah, so if... Oh,
yes, Mr. Curtis, please.
So let's look, we're working on the English, and the French will fix later, if, with your permission, just to get this right. In that sense, if we understand correctly, it would be, the new paragraph would read, recognizes the need to reflect on the follow-up of inscribed elements and ways for concerned communities, groups, and where applicable individuals to participate in the monitoring of inscribed elements.
Netherlands.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you use the word concerned, that's not standard language of the convention. And what you do then is saying that it's only these communities, the concerned communities, who can participate and not other communities, if I am correct. And so you are narrow it down, the phrase of communities, groups, and individuals.
Yes, Netherlands? No, Austria.
Yeah, in line with what has just been said, and I don't want to extend this discussion, but now we are we redefine the whole communities, groups, and individuals to other stakeholders that will be involved in this monitoring, because it's not only the communities that are concerned with the element, but it's also academia, it's also other communities. So actually we would prefer to keep the amendment by our delegation of China made to include all other stakeholders, so that we don't redefine the communities, groups, and individuals. Thank you.
Palestine?
Well, actually, it was the same proposal, which is my initial proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can we take this into consideration now after the observations made? Yes, Poland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Austria just expressed our wondering concerning stakeholders. I would leave it because it's very important, because we have to include, for example, like we just said, scientific milieu and others very much interested in supporting of the safeguarding of the elements. So it's very important. So I would stay with this wording, other stakeholders. Thank you.
We listen to Philippines, but I believe that we have more or less agreed on the final format. Let us hear Philippines.
Yes, Mr. Chairperson, we just wanted to explain that we were under the understanding that we would track the language of the convention and the operational directives, and other stakeholders is not included in the relevant article or the operational directive. However, if the committee feels that we want to expand, we were not going to oppose it, but we just wanted to say that the reason why we made our amendments is because the idea was to track what's in what has already been agreed. We want to point out that other stakeholders is not in the convention and not in the operational directives. Thank you.
I believe that we should use a harmonized language, and as far as possible, we try to stick to the convention and what is included there. But can I ask Mr. Curtis to just give us some insight?
Perhaps I'd just allow myself to make a suggestion that might help. If instead of other stakeholders, we would say on the follow-up of inscribed elements and ways for concerned communities, recognizes the need to reflect on the follow-up of inscribed elements and ways for concerned communities, groups, and where applicable, and ways in particular, because if you had ways in particular, the idea is to put the particularity, the emphasis on concerned communities, groups, and individuals, rather than the exclusivity on them. It gets confusing because of groups and where applicable individuals. So, but if you would say, that recognizes the need to reflect on the follow-up of inscribed elements and ways, and in particular, and that doesn't make it exclusive, and in particular, ways for, and in particular, no, yes, ways for comes after in particular. And take out and other stakeholders. So, meaning that there is an emphasis on concerned communities, groups, and where applicable individuals, but it is not an exclusive, it is not exclusively on them. Is that a proposal that would work?
Do we agree? Yes. There's consensus, Palestine?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, but I think that the language becomes confusing because we're saying recognizes the need to reflect on the follow-up of inscribed elements, and in particular as if we are talking for the need, and in particular ways as if the need was the particular need for the ways for concerned party to participate in the monitoring. I think it is a question of language. It's confusing here. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So in that case, are we back to the suggestion of Philippines?
No, Philippines didn't want. We go back to all other stakeholders. Netherlands.
With all, we include all of the stakeholders as suggested by Poland, Netherlands.
I just wanted to add that I thought that the suggestion by the Secretariat was correct. If you put in particular right in front of for concerns, so not in front of ways, because I agree with the Palestinian colleague that it would refer to the ways when you put it in front of ways. But as I understood it, you could say recognizes the need to reflect on the follow-up of inscribed elements and ways, in particular for concerned communities, groups, and where applicable individuals, to participate in the monitoring of inscribed elements. Thank you.
Yes. Philippines? Philippines and Poland who want to...
We can support what the Netherlands just read out, but I think she didn't put in the, she put the in particular above, and then the other stakeholders would somehow incorporate it in her formulation without, I mean, we're not going to stick on this, but we support what she just read out. Thank you.
Poland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you are speaking about the language used by convention, I would like to remind you that in our overall results framework, just adopted, and we can find it in our textbook, in our basic text, is used exactly this formula, including for that groups, communities, groups, and individuals, and other stakeholders for safeguarding intangible cultural heritage. So we don't, in fact, create something new. We just repeat what just been adopted. So please, I would be very much in line to stay with this previous version when the stakeholders, they are just in the text of this paragraph. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Curtis.
So if I understand correctly, what's being proposed now is we return and other stakeholders, but we take out in particular. Exactly, okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, that's right.
Philippines?
We have no problem now. It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine because
Okay.
just to move forward,
Okay,
and we understand that. But we just want to say that because we were trying to track the language of the particular part in the convention where we're defining communities, and we thank the distinguished delegate of Poland for bringing it into our reflection that it's also, of course, in other parts of the operational directive. So we've heard.
We remove particular, and we
have no issue with it, actually. It was just that to be consistent, actually. Thank you.
Are we agreeable now to the text in red? Okay. Therefore, we have it adopted. We move to paragraph 6. No objection. Adopted. Paragraph 7. Adopted. Now we agree to adopt decision 13-9 as amended. Adopted.